Chapter 6, of Sharp Things and Clean White Coats. Naruto stared at the blurring scenery with dull interest, and he had long since gotten used to the sensation of Anko's naked navel pressing against his own bare back. Mitarashi, he spoke calmly, as if he hadn't been abducted by a woman whom was batshit crazy and being spirited off to only the false god knows where, and the fact was, only he or she did know. "Where are you taking me?" he asked in the same tone one uses when deciding between two different flavors of tea. The 3/4 naked stopped, a bemused expression coming over her features. I'm not sure," she said, sounding baffled. "I'm not really sure why I grabbed you in the first place. Or what I was doing going to the library, for that matter." "Let me guess," Naruto asked helpfully, "it was as if you felt compelled there. Like some higher power directed you to go that library," he said with a complete lack of enthusiasm in his words. "Yeah," Anko stared down at the head of blonde hair, her eyes narrowed. "I suppose that sounds about right, brat. But how did you know?" she asked suspiciously. "Just call it a gut instinct," he excused his intuition, and then realized something. Speaking of his gut, or, rather, the area around it, the damn fox had been unnaturally silent on the matter of his abduction. Normally he wouldn't question this small blessing, but given her recent fascination with human reproduction, he found it more than strange that she wasn't mocking him for being abducted by a less than fully clothed kunoichi that many ninja in Konoha considered to be a sex spot. At the very least she should have made a comment about his penis. Maybe he was being paranoid, then again. It wasn't paranoia if a malevolent pseudo-deity was out to make your life hell, but he couldn't help the sudden overwhelming sensation of dread that soon slid down his spine. It was as if he had just been told the world was totally and irrevocably doomed and that it was all his fault. No, nothing good could come of this, Naruto would bet his neon orange, glow-in-the-dark boxers on it. "Gut instinct?" Anko asked, staring down at the child she still held to her torso in a vice-like grip. "Sorry, kid, but I ain't buying that. You know something, I don't know what, but I'm going to find out." "Damn it all," Naruto swore under his breath, hanging his head. At this point, all he wanted to do was go back to his apartment, barricade the door, and pretended that the whole outside world did not exist. "Hey," Anko slapped the child upside the head. "Language," she scolded. Naruto glared up at her, rubbing his injured head. His line of sight was met by the underside of Anko's cleavage. To his surprise, he found himself not blushing at the sight. Well, it was bound to happen sooner or later. He supposed, the only woman he had encountered since his little joyous happy fun trip back in time were either unholy abominations or women who seemed to lack any sense of modesty or propriety. "Really?" he asked, nonetheless diverting his eyes from the female ninja's cleavage, as having the mind of teenager and the prepubescent body of a child sent very confusing and conflicting signals. "You, of all people, are going to lecture me on proper etiquette around children?" he asked. "Well, I am an adult," Anko shrugged. "I thought I should make some effort," she explained. "You walk around in clothing that is one strong breeze away from a charge of public indecency," Naruto began to list. "You've kidnapped a minor while you are still dressed in aforementioned state of attire. I know for a fact that curse and drink like a sailor. And I won't even begin to list some of the more outrageous rumors I hear about your conduct," Naruto finished. "Ms. Mitarashi, you are in no place to be acting as a role model to a minor, in any capacity." Anko scowled at the child and slapped him upside the noggin once more. The kid was right, didn't mean that she had to like the fact, or that she wouldn't take her displeasure out on said child for pointing the fact out. "I've decided," Anko announced suddenly, "that you've been a naughty boy and need to be punished. I'm taking you home." Naruto stiffened, his blue eyes widened as a terror so great that not even if the whole of Akatsuki were before him, it would not be matched. Visions of chains and whips and leather, oh so much leather, suddenly filled his thoughts. The last thing he needed besides being in that situation was for the damn fox to get ideas from it. "Like hell you are," Naruto resumed his struggle and even resorted to sinking his teeth into the pale flesh of the arm restraining him. "Ow, you little shit," Anko swore at the child, not paying any mind to the fact that she herself had just been scolding and lecturing the child for such language not even 30 seconds prior. "I don't know you," Naruto suddenly yelled out, as loud as he could. "You are a stranger. Help, I need an adult." Anko just stared at the child, not quite sure how to react to what she had just heard. Really, she asked incredulously, not quite believing that she had found herself in this situation. Naruto just glared darkly at a nearby building, seeing that no one was coming to his aid. Those after-school specials are full of it, he grumbled to himself darkly. I can't believe you actually thought that would work, Anko admitted, still shocked by the surrealism of the situation that she had yet to recall her plans to take the kid back to her place. So thrilled to know that the youth of Konoha are easy prey to overweight men with carriages that have free candy painted on the side of them, he said, very jaded by the situation. Don't worry, children, these nice men seem legit, don't be a coward, now. Besides, even if they are rapists and molesters, it won't matter how loud you scream, no one will come to save you anyway. This way, at least, you have the possibility of getting some free candy out of the deal, Naruto ranted to himself. People also apparently won't save you from half-naked, insane trench coat-clad women, for that matter, he dug a barb at his captor. Anko scowled, that had been a low blow, and she was fairly certain that she hadn't deserved the comment. I am looking for a friend, a voice suddenly split into the air, causing the child and the older woman to stop their bickering. Anko turned her head in curiosity, and Naruto went rigid in the woman's grasp. What the hell was that? Anko asked, searching for the source of the noise. She would have dismissed the sound as the being the keel of a wounded animal, but it had clearly spoken words. Even if the speech sounded weird and slurred, it was speech nonetheless. Nothing, Naruto quickly spoke. You said we were going to your place, he asked, tugging incessantly on the older woman's coat. Come on, let's go. Don't want to be late for our play date, do we? Anko glanced down the child, seeing the look of fear that covered his suddenly pale face. Do you know that person? She asked, interested as to why the boy seemed to be so scared of the voice's owner when he wasn't afraid of herself. Person? What person? Naruto asked, his eyes darting about rapidly. There is no person. Why would you think there was a person? You're crazy. Don't be crazy. There is no person, he said rapidly as a fearful sweat broke out across his pale skin. Hey, I have an idea. Let's be anywhere but right here. Come on. Let's go, the boy said, his voice slowly rising in panic until he was a wide-eyed ball of frayed nerves. A strangely ominous whirling noise filled the air, and the boy let out a sob. I don't care, he begged the woman. I'll do anything. You can do whatever the hell you want to me, just don't let her get me, Naruto begged, staring straight into Anko's eyes. Anko stared back, her jaw hanging open. What the hell could make a child so afraid? Casting one last look around to try to find the source of the voice or the strange whirling noise, she shrugged and leapt to a nearby rooftop. Come back. I am looking for a friend. I will love you long time, a voice yelled out to the retreating woman, and Anko turned to see the source of the voice and then she ran off as fast as she could. Fourth wall. One Shikamaru stepped out from the library. His clothes were torn and wrinkled, and blood dripped from both ears. One foot stepped in front of another, he was simply going about the motions of walking as a purely muscular exercise than by any conscious act of doing so. A blonde-haired girl dressed in dark shades stomped up to him, her face contorted in anger. She planted her hands on her hips and began yelling at him, or Shikamaru guessed that she was yelling at him, based off of her expression. All he could see was her mouth moving, he seemed to have gone temporarily deaf. Interesting, that, he thought. Standing there and watching the girl's mouth open and close for a few moments, a small, traumatized corner of the dark-haired youth's brain recalled that he knew this person. But said corner of his brain was ignored. All that Shikamaru knew was that this person was a female, and, as such, he wanted nothing to do with her at current, and any point in the future, for that matter, moment in time. And she was blonde, like him. No, Shikamaru wanted nothing to do with this woman who happened to be blonde, like him. Reaching out one hand, Shikamaru calmly shoved the girl to one side and resumed his walk, his expression totally serene, that is. If you didn't count the fact that the right side of his face had seemed to have developed a rather disturbing and uncontrollable twitch to it, through no fault of his own. Leaving the shocked blonde behind, Shikamaru put his vast intellect to the process of where he could most easily come into possession of something sharp, preferably rusty. Though that would be a bonus, very quickly. Fourth wall. Anko ran, and she ran fast. What the flying fuck was that? She swore. It was human, right? She asked, more to herself than the child she still held securely to herself. At least, it looked human, a thought occurred to her. Did one of the snake bastard's experiments get loose, she wondered, that would explain what she had seen, at least. I wish that thing was simply the result of your teacher, Naruto spoke bitterly. No, he informed Anko. Not even the amazing pale-faced pedophile would think of something that demented, and you and I both know how out of his gourd he was. Then what the hell was that? Anko demanded, not currently caring on how a 10-year-old who had not even entered Ninja Academy knew of her old teacher. Let alone the fact that he had dabbled in some seriously messed up shit. I'm not quite sure on that, Naruto told the woman. All I know is where it came from, the deepest, darkest pits of my nightmares, he said with such certainty that none would argue the conviction. Anko, still shaken, decided to offer her opinion. I've seen some messed up shit, she confessed, thinking back to some of the experiments her former teacher had performed. But until now, I have never doubted the existence of God. Oh no, Naruto corrected her in an almost gentle-sounding tone. I would so very dearly like to believe that, too. I really would. Sadly, I know that there is God, and he or she created that thing for the sole purpose of making my life miserable. Anko hadn't heard the blonde's explanation, instead various thoughts were racing through her mind at lightning speed. How do we kill it, she wondered. I would suggest with fire, Naruto offered his opinion. Anko found herself nodding in agreement. Fire is good. Very good, Naruto agreed, nodding sagely. Fourth wall. Shikamaru stepped into the weapons shop, not paying any mind to Tenten. She was female, though she wasn't blonde, like him. No, instead the young genius walked over to the nearest kunai and ran it across the pad of one finger, watching disinterested. A slash of crimson appeared. How fascinating, Shikamaru thought, staring at his own blood. He contemplated the instrument that had been able to harm him. Surely it could harm the blonde, as well? Shikamaru put the knife back, shaking his head. No, this would never do. Honestly, what had he been thinking? A simple blade, against the devil? No, it would never work, but he would find something that would work. Yes, he would. A flash of steel caught the youth's eyes, and he wandered over to a rack of very sharp-looking swords. They looked very, very deadly, he noted with satisfaction, smiling at the weapons. Tenten stared at Shikamaru from behind the safety of the counter, slowly reaching for something to defend herself with, if the need arose. Why was there blood dried coming from his ears? More importantly, why was he smiling at the swords like he was? Yes, Shikamaru decided, these weapons might be able to kill the devil. You see, he had come to the conclusion that Naruto Uzumaki was the devil in human form, and he blonde. And the woman was the servant of the blonde devil. It all made perfect, rational sense when you stopped to think about it, really. Tenten, he asked, picking up a sword. How suitable is this blade for cutting a human in two? He asked casually in a tone that was better suited for discussing the weather than speaking on the subject that he currently was. Tenten was silent, staring at the potential customer/potential serial killer. It should do the job fine, she answered hesitantly. Shikamaru stared at his reflection in the blade, and smiled. No, he tsked. I need specifics, he demanded. What if it has to cut through hair? He asked. Human hair, he elaborated a moment after. Tenten wasn't sure what was happening, but she was certain that she wanted no part of it. Should cut through human hair fine, she answered Nara. Shikamaru hummed to himself, inspecting the weapon from every angle. What about blonde hair? He asked with strange intensity, and Tenten was struck by the strange inflection he placed upon the word blonde, as if it had some sort of significance. Blonde hair shouldn't be a problem, she answered. Are you asking me or are you telling me? Shikamaru asked politely, turning to stare at Tenten, and the young girl wished dearly that he hadn't. Telling, she assured him quickly, slouching behind the counter in an attempt to escape the Nara's gaze. Fantastic, he said happily. He then put the sword back on the shelf and walked over the counter. How was your day, Tenten? He asked pleasantly, making small talk as if he hadn't just been staring at a weapon and contemplating the murder of a fellow villager. Tenten swallowed. My day's been pretty okay, she forced a smile on her face. How about you? You started the academy today, didn't you? She asked. Me, Shikamaru asked. Oh no, he answered pleasantly, smiling at her. I ran into Naruto, he said, as if that explained everything. Oh, Tenten said, and wondered what to say next. Well, that explains that, she said lamely, still smiling. Her face was beginning to hurt. Doesn't it? Shikamaru said, and his expression changed to one that was long-suffering. Everything was silent, each smiling at the other. Well, Shikamaru spoke so suddenly that Tenten visibly jumped in fright, raising her hands to shield her face from whatever sharp object he might have with him. You have a good day, Tenten, he said, placing a hand amicably on the young woman's shoulder and smiling. Tenten had to fight down the violent urge to shudder. You, too, Shikamaru, she said in a very forced manner, stretching her grin so wide that it was physically painful. Shikamaru seemed not to notice, simply nodding at her and turning around, shoving his hands in his pockets and walking out, whistling an upbeat tune. How silly of him, he thought to himself. Weapons won't be able to kill the devil. What was he thinking? He idly wondered when he had started thinking in italics, but it didn't really matter all that much. Did it? No, of course it didn't. After all, his italic thoughts were neither female nor were they blonde. So that made it okay. Everything was okay. Or, at least, it would be, very, very soon. And Shikamaru smiled. At that same moment, a small kitten died a horrible death. But that was okay because the kitten's death was unrelated to Shikamaru's smile. Fourth wall. Naruto found himself in Anko's apartment, and was rather surprised by the lack of snake theme motif and the complete lack of chains and various other S&M equipment. Maybe they were in the bedroom? But, then again, he really didn't need to know, he had decided. Let me see if I got this straight, brat, Anko began, a jug of sake in one hand. God, the true God, is some guy named Kishimoto, she asked. Naruto nodded. And he controls all of our destinies. Another nod. Except, he's currently not controlling our destinies right now, another god is. A false god, the woman asked, reviewing all that she had been told. Correct. Naruto was rather pleased that she was following this situation so well. And this false god, he started the next great war and destroyed Konoha for no other reason than to have a cool battle. Don't worry, Naruto assured the woman, I fixed everything, he informed her with a smile. Right, because you became aware of the false god because you broke something, some kind of wall. The blonde nodded. The fourth wall, yes, he confirmed. What happened to the first three? Anko found herself asking, curious. Naruto tilted his head. The first three what? Walls. You said you broke the fourth wall, so wasn't there 3 walls before the fourth one? Did you break them, too? Anko asked. I don't know, maybe? I don't think they're important, Naruto offered with a shrug, casting the thought from his mind. Right, Anko mumbled. How silly she think that the first 3 non-existent walls should matter. Anyway, she dismissed. You broke reality, she recounted, trying to see if she was still following the child's logic. And then I traveled back in time, Naruto added. Yes, of course. Anko took a rather large drink of her alcohol, some of it spilling down her chin and into the valley between her breasts. How could we forget the time travel? Don't worry, Naruto said, reaching over and patting her comfortably on the arm. You're new to this, he reassured her with a gentle smile. Anko was quite proud of herself for not shuddering in front of the creepy child. Moving on, Anko said. This false god created that thing to be your friend, she asked. The false god hates me, Naruto said somberly, hanging his head. Have I forgotten anything? The older ninja asked. I turned the 9 tails into a human woman, and she's a voyeuristic pervert who has a disturbing fascination with penises, mine in particular, the blonde child said matter of fact. Right, musing forget that the evil demon fox is now a human pervert with a pair of tits, Anko muttered. She felt she should be much more alarmed over the fact that the child knew about the existence of the fox, let alone that he was apparently either talking to it or having delusions about it. And then you met me. Naruto clapped his hands, elated. She understood. Yes, so you'll help me, then, he asked hopefully. Anko stared at the child, then at her bottle of alcohol and the many empty ones that littered the room. She chugged the rest of the bottle. Don't worry, brat, she said, wiping her mouth on the sleeve of her trench coat. I know just who to talk to, she said. Fourth wall. He shouldn't have been surprised, he really shouldn't have. Didn't change the fact that he was, though. Naruto stared through the reinforced glass at the face of the third Hokage, who was smiling reassuringly at him. Don't worry, Naruto. The shadow of fire spoke to him from the other side of the door. We're going to make sure you get better. Naruto tried to free his arms, but his struggles proved no match for the white restraint jacket he had found himself forced into. The third Hokage turned his head to Anko, who stood at his side, staring at the young child in padded cell. You said he knew of the fox, he asked the kunoichi. Anko nodded. Said he turned her into a human woman, taught her about the birds and the bees, and now the fox has a fascination with his penis. Apparently she informed her superior. Sarutobi nodded and said nothing. There really was nothing you could say after being told that. Let me out. I'm not crazy, Naruto protested, fighting against the straitjacket. You can't leave me here. She'll find me, he called out in desperation. Is he still talking about the fox? The leader of the village asked, watching the child with great sorrow and pity in his face. The child had suffered so much in his life already, and now fate saw it fit to bestow this newest misfortune upon him. No, Anko shook his head. There actually is something loose in the village, she informed the leader. I think it might be one of the snake bastard's experiments that got loose after all these years. She paused as a thought occurred to her. I think the Uzumaki brat, she gestured to the restrained youth, might have run into it and it could have caused this, she hedged. Referring to the cheese sliding of the blonde's metaphorical cracker. The Hokage frowned. That was troubling news. Until that creature was caught, it was a danger to the ninja and civilians. There was no telling what the twisted mind of his former student had concocted, and whatever it was, it had apparently driven young Naruto insane. I want you and team of Anbu to hunt down creature and dispose of it before any further causalities arise, he ordered. Anko nodded swiftly and began walking away, muttering to herself about fire. The third turned one final time to the window and offered Naruto one last smile of encouragement before he turned away with a heavy heart, feeling every bit as old as he actually was. Naruto stared at the retreating figure of the leader of the village. He slid one of the cushioned walls. It was official, he was fucked. Fourth wall. Author's note, I'm surprised at where this story is going. I'll be honest, this story doesn't really have a plan. I just sit down at computer and have only one goal for this story, to lampshade and viciously mock any all cliches in the Naruto fandom. I've already tackled unrealistic original characters and the Nine Tails having a human form, even though I am quite fond of that of plot device. Myself, I literally just see where my mind takes me and go from there. I shall show no mercy to anything. Now, I am aware of that there are typos. I reread every chapter after I finish typing it, and yet I still find myself re-uploading chapters after I finish them. Does anyone know how I go about finding a beta reader? Or are there any volunteers, perhaps? If so, answer in a review, please, it would be very appreciated. Anyway, enjoy, and hope that my doctor does not refill my medication anytime soon. Chapter 7, Reproduction and the Devil. And that, my good friend Chouji, Shikamaru said, smiling calmly at his childhood friend, is why a slice of toast always lands butter side down. The plump Akimichi's bag of snacks had long since run out and he really wished he could get more, but frankly, he was too terrified to take his eyes off of his friend to go get them. Smacking his lips and running his tongue over the, Chouji squinted at Shikamaru in confusion. I thought you were telling me on why that Uzumaki killed is the devil, he began, confused. Devil, Chouji, Shikamaru chided. He is the devil. Chouji looked about, totally confused. Isn't that what I said? Shikamaru shook his head. You forgot to capitalize the D, he explained. It is very important that you capitalize the D. I'm sorry, Chouji offered. That's quite all right, Shikamaru assured, still smiling serenely, a fact that made Chouji nervous to no end. It just wasn't right seeing anything other than bored indifference on the Nara's face. It's a simple mistake to make. Chouji nervously toyed with his hands, not quite sure what to do with them since he longer had some food to eat. So, what does toast have to do with Naruto, he asked. Shikamaru let out a sigh and shook his head. How troublesome. Hadn't Chouji been listening? Since Uzumaki is the devil, he is the source of all the troublesome little minor inconveniences in the world, Shikamaru repeated once more. Toast always falling buttered side to the floor? Naruto's fault. He paused for a moment and a thoughtful look came across his face. To think of it, he mused, I know always nagging at me might also be his fault, as well. The genius dismissed the thought. No, 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 I'm being silly, he chided himself. It's because Aino is female and blonde, he realized. She cannot help it, it wasn't Aino's fault that she was blonde or female, so that was okay. Everything would soon be okay. Chaoji really wished his friend would stop placing emphasis on certain words, so. It was really disconcerting. Shikamaru, an enraged female voice called out, and the young boy being called turned and smiled at her serenely. The Naru would have thought of the old saying about speaking of the devil and he will appear, but clearly Aino wasn't Naruto, so that was also silly. She was, however, blonde and female. She also seemed pissed, Shikamaru noted with interest. Troublesome. How dare you skip out on the first day of class, she yelled, her ponytail whipping about in such a manner that it reminded the Naru of how a cat's tail moved when angered. And then you shove me, she yelled, now inches from the lazy genius's face as she continued her tirade. Shikamaru smiled gently at Aino and the young girl found her ire fading in the face of confusion. This wasn't Shikamaru's normal behavior. There was something off about him. She discreetly glanced towards Chaoji and saw that the other boy seemed as confused as she was, and very nervous, as well. Shikamaru placed a hand on the young woman's shoulder. It wasn't a threatening gesture by any means, and yet Aino found herself fighting her fight-or-flight instincts that were screaming at her to do the latter. I'm sorry for shoving you, Aino, Shikamaru said calmly, still smiling at the blue-eyed girl. That was very rude of me, he apologized. Aino swallowed nervously. Don't worry about, she said, looking around for some way out of the situation, and finding none. Wonderful, Shikamaru hummed. Please, he gestured to the bench that Chaoji was sitting on. Won't you take a seat, he asked. Aino sat down next to Chaoji. The request was perfectly polite and gentlemanly, but she knew that it was not a request. Please put this on, Shikamaru ordered more than he asked, holding out a hat that he had pulled out of her pocket to the young girl. Aino bristled at the command, staring at the hat. Are you saying more hair looks bad, she demanded, her voice rising, and then immediately regretted doing so when all that Shikamaru did was smile at her, still holding out the hat. Your hair looks lovely, Shikamaru assured her. It's just that it's blonde, he said, as if the fact was as obvious as the sky was blue. Aino took the hat, finding it best to argue with her seemingly insane teammate. Her father had told her what the minds of the insane were like and she wanted nothing to do with setting Shikamaru off. Look at that, Shikamaru observed with a smile as she placed the hat over her hair. It matches your clothing quite splendidly, he said, clapping his hands together. Aino shifted on the bench, not sure how to react. What's wrong with my hair, she asked after she had finally worked up the nerve. Shikamaru leaned closer to his female childhood friend. Aino, let me tell you about the devil, he spoke. The devil, Aino asked, and Chaoji found himself cringing as he heard her lack of apparently proper capitalization of the first letter. Devil, Aino, Shikamaru lectured. The capital D is very important, Shikamaru said pleasantly. And Aino was reminded of a serial killer calmly telling a potential victim that if she tried any shenanigans that he would quite happily rip out her spleen and turn it into a tea cozy. Sorry, Aino said meekly, trying to make herself appear small and insignificant. Quite all right, Shikamaru assured. She hadn't known. How was she to know? So that was okay. Fourth wall. Naruto decided that being declared insane was very, very boring. I thought that insane people were placed in here to get well. Naruto had only been in here for 2 hours and he thought he was beginning to lose his mind out of the sheer boredom of it. Of course, the sheer terror that the Technicolor Abomination was hunting him down and there currently wasn't a damn thing he would be able to do to stop it did not help his peace of mind any. For not the first time, he thought many uncomplimentary terms about Anko and wished that she soon find herself in interesting times. Fourth wall. Lee, a green-clad man in a vest, declared. There is a most unyouthful young woman walking the streets of Konoha, the martial arts expert declared. Yes, Guy-sensei, a younger mini-me version of the older declared. It is our duty to find this young woman and show her the flames of youth, he decreed. Guy-sensei, Lee cried, embracing his teacher as the nimbus of a rising sun manifested itself in the background behind them. Lee. Guy-sensei. Lee. Tenten, whom had had enough crazy for one day when Shikamaru had been oogling the sharp objects in the weapons store she worked at, was not going to put up with her teammate and teacher's usual insanity. It was in this spirit that she threw a large amount of weapons at them. Most ninja would have considered her reaction to be excessive, but she felt that it wasn't enough, if anything. "Can we get on with it?" the weapons master cried. "We do have a mission." Niji said nothing, instead brooding silently about fate, as he was wont to do, but he secretly was grateful to his female teammate. "Your enthusiasm is a shining example of youth, my student," Mighty Guy cried, flashing her a dazzling smile and sticking one thumb triumphantly up in the air in approval. Mato Guy then leaped away in his signature entry move, nowhere close to where one Uzumaki Naruto was, by any means. Fourth wall. Naruto was not surprised to find himself in the sewer of his mind. The sewer of his mind, he reflected on that last description, and began to wonder if he didn't actually belong in his padded cell. "What do you want?" he asked tiredly, more than a little annoyed to find himself still in his straitjacket, even though it was his own mind. The Ninetales stared at the boy. "Why are you wearing that?" she asked, her speech momentarily forgotten. "Because I was cold and the nice men were kind enough to give this jacket to keep me warm," Naruto said facetiously. The Ninetales shrugged her shoulders, since that explanation made as much as any. "I must thank you, brat," she began, toying with a long strand of raven hair that had fallen over one of her breasts and acting as some form of modesty. When she shifted it and exposed herself to the boy, Naruto found that he simply could not bring himself to give a damn over the sight or even blush. "You have shown me the key to ruling your world," she said, flashing her sharpened canines at him in a feral grin. Naruto nodded. "Yeah, that's great," he dismissed. "Hey, why aren't you talking in bold letters anymore?" he asked. The woman blinked at him. "What do you mean?" "I've always talked like this," she said. "No," Naruto denied. "You always spoke in bold letters and never used quotation marks in your speech," he informed her, glancing 2 lines above in the narration. "In previous chapters you never used quotation marks and your speech was always in bold letters, except when we were in that white space, but I'm still trying to figure that out." Narration. The woman was confused. What was the blonde rambling about? "I figured some things out," Naruto confessed. "You see, this is all just a story and I am the protagonist, which I think means I can get away with just about anything and everything will work out in the end, but I'm not quite sure on that yet. Especially given the unique habit this storyline has to screw me over at the earliest possible convenience," Naruto said, not metaphorically tap dancing on the remains of the fourth wall. "Anyway, the Ninetales dismissed. As I was saying, I must thank you for," she began, only to be cut off once more. Yeah, Naruto cut in, seeming far more serious than any person in a straitjacket had any right to be. "You can tell me your plan in a minute," he told the woman. "Right now you need a name," he decided. The Ninetales blinked at him. "Why?" Naruto rolled his eyes. "Because, honestly, the amount of times you have been referred to as the Ninetales, demon, fox, some form of fox-turned human, or a reference to your gender is getting a little redundant in the narration. Not mention the inconsistent capitalization of the word fox," Naruto added. "I don't have a name," the fox informed him, and Naruto shuddered at yet another example in the narration. "Okay, that's fine," Naruto said. "I'm going to name you Victoria," he told the woman. Victoria blinked at the child. "Why Victoria?" she asked. "That doesn't even sound Japanese," she added. "I don't care," Naruto told her. "It's the first name I thought of, and, quite frankly, I don't give a damn." Victoria shrugged her shoulder. What did she care what the brat wanted to call her in his delusions? "Oh, and you might want to be kind of quick explaining your plans of world domination since you don't have much time," he informed her quite politely. Victoria snarled at the impertinence of the youth. "This conversation is finished when I say it is finished. Not you." Naruto shook his head. "Oh, I have no say in the matter, either," he told her. "I'm just noticing the scene break about in a little while," he said, looking at the floor and seeming to see the 2 italic words in question. Victoria didn't have the patience to indulge the brat's insanity. "Humans are capable of reproduction," she began, smirking triumphantly. "Congratulations, you paid attention to the book I read you," Naruto said. The raven-haired woman now named Victoria paid no mind to his comment. "Children have half of the mother and half of the father," she continued. "You really do have a knack for stating the obvious," Naruto observed, glancing at his feet to see how close the scene break was. So, if I reproduce, my children will have 4.5 tails of chakra, and I can start an army that will overtake you pitiful humans, she declared triumphantly, smirking at the cocky child to see just what he had to say to that. Naruto stared at her, his zen-like mood shattered by the sheer outrageousness of her plan. Wow, he began. That is, there are so many flaws in that plan, I do not know where to begin, he informed her. Victoria scowled at him, how dare he mock her. Her plan was perfect. What do you mean, she sneered. Naruto idly noted that the fox was getting better at expressions. For a start, he began, you fail biology forever, he told her. That is not how reproduction works. A child only gets his or her DNA from the mother and father, he recalled from the book he had read. Not chakra. That's not even to mention the fact that you're really a giant fox and that you're currently stuck within me. Oh, and you seem to be forgetting the fact that the human form you have now is simply a mental construct, he reminded her. So, Victoria asked, and Naruto had to do a double take to make sure that the fox was indeed pouting. So, Naruto began, beginning to lose his cool with the conversation, and dearly wishing that he wasn't in a straitjacket. People didn't take others serious when they were in straitjackets. I'm the only one in my mind, he informed Victoria in the same tone an adult would explain to a child why they could not go running about naked in public. Even if a Yamanaka came in here, you'd be stuck behind that seal, he nodded his head to the cage. I'm the greatest of all the tailed demons, brat, Victoria began haughtily. I'm pretty certain I can trick a mere human into entering the seal, she declared. Again, Naruto began, beginning to feel the start of a migraine. How was it even possible to get a migraine when you were inside of your own head? You're just a mental figment, he reiterated. He would be a mental figment. There would be no baby batter, he declared. How had this happened? He had been feeling so calm a few moments ago. Besides, you have no internal plumbing. Your real body doesn't even have a gender. Victoria sniffed. I can fix that, she declared haughtily. Her plan was genius, she knew. I'll just make myself the proper organs. I paid attention to that book. She then looked at Naruto, a gleam in her eyes. Since you're my container, I'll just have you procreate with my true form. Naruto gaped at her. Was she serious? She couldn't be. Didn't she realize? No, of course she didn't. Victoria, Naruto began very calmly. How tall is your real form? He asked. Victoria shrugged, looking at the claws/nails. A couple of stories, I would imagine, she guessed. Naruto nodded. Right, he said. Now, look at how tall I am, he said, and the woman did indeed gaze at him. Naruto felt the beginnings of hope swell within his breast, only to have it dashed when the woman shrugged. So. Naruto grit his teeth and struggled within the straitjacket. I am not going spelunking in the vagina of a giant fox, he yelled. There is no way that is happening. Do you understand, me? No way, he declared, now having descended into a rage. Before he could continue his rant, he vanished. Fourth wall. Naruto once more found himself in his padded cell. Looking up, he tried to see the italic words that he knew were there, but found for some reason that he could not. Oh well, Naruto growled, still angered by his conversation with Fox. Crazy woman probably just wanted to get pregnant so her boobs would get bigger, he thought bitterly. They get bigger? Victoria asked, now staring down at her breasts in wonder. Does this have to do with them filling with milk? He heard the woman ask in his head. Before Naruto could even begin to tell the fox that he was not going to have this conversation with her, the padded wall just behind him imploded. Deus ex machina, a voice cried out triumphantly, and then its owner stopped to wonder why he had said that. Naruto turned and wasn't surprised to see Mato Guy now standing in front of a hole in his wall. What was that? Naruto asked the leader of, now that he thought of it, this man's team didn't have a number, did they? That was my signature most youthful move, Guy declared, though still a bit distracted as to how he ended up here. He had been nowhere near the hospital, and why had he called that move by that name? But it is called dynamic entry, he spoke to himself. Why did I call it Deus ex machina? What is a Deus ex machina? He wondered, quite perplexed. Naruto stared at the man and then at the hole in the wall, deciding not to question the fact that this messed up reality had worked in his favor for once. Trust me, he spoke to the man as he walked through the door, intent on putting as much distance between himself and the no doubt approaching OC as possible. It's best not to dwell on this matter. Fourth wall. Some time later, though he wouldn't notice it, his inexplicable movement through time and storyline had an effect on Mato Guy that the teacher did not notice. Green ones and zeros periodically appeared around him. A plot hole had been formed, and from that point on, it could only grow. Fourth wall. Meanwhile, Shikamaru was still smiling as he lectured his friends. Insanity was interesting. Naruto had found over the 3+ weeks that he had been trapped in this strange prison. Before, he had resolved that he was the only sane person in the world. The damn fox could have been counted among that elite club, but she was far too fascinated by genitalia for Naruto's comfort. So no membership for her. Before, he had been sane. It true, he really, truly had. He had been surrounded by a tornado of insanity of the batshit variety, and he had been the eye of that damned storm. But now? He glanced down at the straitjacket that he had been wearing for near a month. Well, at least he was dressed appropriately for his newfound mental state, he thought. Though he really would have preferred the padded cell to his new prison, he decided as he glared at the floating walls of strange symbols that had descended and imprisoned him. Naruto walked briskly from a confused mighty guy before the man-cow. The line of symbols vanished only to be replaced by a new one, as they always were, the blonde ninja had noticed. Anko stared at the abomination before and vowed she would hunt down her old sensei and kill him for his hand in this. That line of strange symbols were wiped from reality. Naruto dared not touch any of them, having learned all too well the cause-effect relationship that was established by him touching the strange symbols. It could be summed, mathematically, as the following. Dumbass notion to touch symbols plus actual touching equals pain for Naruto. Naruto was thinking of submitting it for review and possible publication. He didn't quite know who or where might be interested in his thoughts, but the idle musings helped to stave off the insanity that was slowly entering his mind. Naruto gazed mournfully down at his stomach, wishing that he could speak with Victoria. She could shove her breasts directly into his face at this point, and he doubted that he would even care. He just wanted to talk to someone. His boredom had given rise to insanity, Naruto knew. He was insane, but he was still sane enough to know it. He figured that put him ahead of the game. Naruto knew he was insane because he had begun hearing voices. Stop narrating about my insanity, Naruto yelled to the air, glaring at no point in particular as he once more heard the voice that felt the need to describe each of his actions. Naruto heard the voice describe his yelling and simply let out a sigh, mourning the loss of his sanity. Hearing voices was not a new experience to the young ninja, per se, but he knew for a fact that the previous voice he heard had been Victoria. And the fact of her existence was carved into the minds of fears of his entire village. Thank you, Mr. Narrator, Naruto grumbled, having decided to give a name to the voice he was hearing. The voice narrated his actions, so Naruto thought the name narrator was very appropriate, though he was ignorant of just how much he was breaking an already very fragile fourth wall. What's the fourth wall? Naruto thought. He vaguely recalled mentioning it himself during a conversation with Victoria, but the memory seemed ethereal and fleeting in his mind. Ethereal, Naruto repeated cynically. Great, now the voice is using words that I don't even understand, he spat bitterly. My own madness is mocking me. Naruto suddenly fell to the floor, his eyes rolled into the back of his head as the voice suddenly vanished from his mind. He had not noticed it, but the block of writing he had been trapped in had vanished, and the narrative resumed once more. Chapter 9, So many deaths, so little time. Aino wanted to cry. Nothing much had happened in the last few weeks. Strangely, each day seemed the same as the one that preceded it, which led her to her current situation. Sitting on a bench in a ramen stand, dressed in neon bright, hey, I'm a ninja but screw stealth, I think I look stylish, so who cares, even though I'll soon die, at least I will look good, damn nitrange. And eating noodles yet again. Chaoji, who was in the same situation, didn't seem to mind, happily slurping bowl after bowl of noodles swimming in salty broth. Aino looked down at the noodles as if they were the intestines of roadkill that had been freshly trodden upon by a trader's wagon wheel. Certainly, she could choose to dress to her usual fabulous standard of style, but then she would risk displeasing Shikamaru. And, to be honest, Shikamaru scared her in the same way that the memory of the nine-tailed fox scared most of the veteran shinobis. Oh, it's not like Shikamaru would get angry. Shikamaru never got angry. Now, everything was okay. How Ino hated that damn word, and the strange way that he seemed to say it that defied all methods of the Japanese language. At most, Shikamaru would simply be mildly perturbed, but then he would smile at her. And he would continue to smile until she cracked and descended into the depths of insanity that he seemed to be currently occupying. "Chowji?" she asked weakly, listly lifting several strands of noodles with a pair of chopsticks and watching them flop in the air. The rotund boy next to her turned his head, a great beard of noodles hanging off of his chin from his mouth. "When did our lives become a never-ending freak show?" she asked miserably. "I think Shikamaru mentioned something about a human-shaped incarnation of female harpy death screeching right before he focused on killing Naruto," Chowji asked, not really caring. It meant all the ramen he could eat. And while he would like something other than noodles at this point, he was never one to turn down a free lunch, and a free dinner, breakfast, snacks and any other meal he wanted to eat. Except the expired milk. He refused to drink the expired milk, no matter how much it would help to put him into Naruto's mindset. "Oh, that's right," Ino said, spying a floating fish cake and stabbing violently at the namesake of the cause of all of her woes, imagining it had blonde hair and a set of whisker-like birthmarks. It cheered her up a little, but didn't do much. "Hey, guys," a slow drawl said from behind them, and Ino stiffened, hurriedly stuffing as many noodles as she could into her mouth, until her cheeks bulged in a chipmunk-like manner. "Shikamaru," Ino turned and greeted, her mouth full of noodles. Then she stopped, her jaw fell open, and a mass of half-masticated noodles fell to the floor. Troublesome, Shikamaru thought, frowning down at the food and moving a step away and to the side of Ino in case she felt further need to projectile launch her food from her mouth. Ino opened her mouth, but all that emerged were a series of inarticulate syllables and guttural noises. Weakly she pointed a shaking finger at Shikamaru, and once more attempted to form speech, but all that escaped from her throat was a sound that resembled the air hissing from a deflated balloon. Chowji, curious as to the cause of Ino's disturbance, turned and raised an eyebrow at his longtime friend. "Hey, Shikamaru," he greeted, capturing a hunk of beef between his chopsticks and popping it into his mouth. "Not wearing orange anymore?" he asked, seeing his friend in his once-upon-a-time usual attire. "Yeah," the lazy genius answered, occupying the vacant stool to Ino's right, but refraining from ordering any ramen. He had consumed far too much sodium than was healthy within a year during the last few weeks. Ino was still catatonic, staring at Shikamaru, but now she was staring at his clothing and then glancing down at her own orange attire. "So, did you get counseling or something?" Chowji asked casually, with all the nonchalance of what one thought of the weather, as if he was not discussing Shikamaru's stint into Crazyville. Located squarely in the center of batshit insane. "Nah," Shikamaru said, shaking his head. "Insanity was simply too tiring, to be honest," he answered. "You," Ino rasped, her eye twitching now. "You mean to tell me that you became sane simply because you found insanity to be too troublesome?" she asked, and Shikamaru seemed to miss the note of impending death in her voice. Shikamaru nodded. Then, without warning, Ino ripped the orange jumpsuit she was wearing, grabbed the pair of chopsticks, let out a blood-curdling screech of murder, and leapt at Shikamaru. Clad in nothing more than her underwear. Ino let out a series of sounds that might have translated into speech not to be spoken in public as she tried her damnedest to stab out Shikamaru's eyes with her chopsticks. Chowji watched the spectacle, thought about intervening, but instead ordered a bowl of miso ramen instead. How troublesome, Shikamaru thought as one of the chopsticks was shoved violently up one of his nostrils as Ino screamed what might have been "Itadakimasu. You bastard," but he could have been mistaken. The fourth wall. Victoria wasn't quite sure what was happening at the moment. The child had suddenly appeared before her prison, walked through the bars of the cell, and politely asked if she could be so kind as to loosen the jacket that he was wearing. Somewhat out of her element, the woman simply slid a sharper-than-natural fingernail along a seam and the coat fell to the water that they both stood in. Naruto then thanked her and proceeded to wrap both of his arms around her and shove his face into her torso, not seeming to mind that her breasts rested upon his blonde hair. He then proceeded to stroke her hair up and down, running his hand over her at the end of each stroke. This had been going on for a good few hours from what she could figure. She began, biting at her lower lip. "Hush," Naruto said, raising a finger and barely being able to place it upon her lips. "No talking now. This is a special moment." "No talking," he said and went back to stroking her hair and her rear, all the while muttering about block 3 weeks. And how someone called the narrator was stalking him, but it was okay because he didn't think the narrator could get them here. Victoria looked down at the boy, blowing a strand of black hair out of her face. She suddenly brightened. Maybe this was some form of human courtship ritual. She looked down at the boy. Well, she couldn't fault his taste. She thought she was one sexy bitch she would kill the kid, no doubt, but at least he had good taste. Yes, this must be some form of courting ritual. She had noticed that other human males paid large amounts of attention to other female humans' posteriors. Maybe she would, how did the humans put it? Get laid, after all. Meanwhile, Naruto simply enjoyed the soft silken feel of Victoria's hair. It was so nice to be out of the box. He was slightly confused, not quite recalling that her hair only fell to her lower back on why her hair suddenly became humped at the end. You smell nice, Naruto said idly. Like human corpses and death, he said pleasantly. Victoria was quite pleased, and lowered her hand from where she was about to impale her claws off his vertebrae, deciding the brat could live a bit longer. The fourth wall. The Hokage frowned severely at the amorphous blob before him. Never in all his years had he encountered such an unholy abomination. Not even the Nine Tails could measure up to this creation. His former student was certainly a wicked individual to have created it. I will be your friend, it said in what might have been speech. 1,000 different eyeballs, some with sharingans, some with a series of rings, some pure white with veins, some simply smiley faces, gazed back at him. Are you sure, Hokage-sama? Mighty Guy asked, looking unusually severe, clasping a hand upon the wizened ninja's shoulder. The fourth had to sacrifice his soul to the god of death to deal with the Kyuubi, the third answered. I can think of no other alternative to end this threat, he said. His hands flashed into a series of intricate symbols, preparing to make the ultimate sacrifice to protect his village. Unknown to the third and Guy, when Guy had placed his hand upon the thread's shoulder, the plot hole that had been stowed away within Mighty Guy had jumped to the third, sensing the old ninja's intent. The fourth wall. The third summoned to call forth death was hijacked by the plot hole, and instead entered into the internet. The fourth wall. A cloaked figure looked up from playing board games with two young men named Bill and Ted, hearing a beckon to be summoned. Frowning, he looked down at his hand and ignored the call. Right hand, red, one of the teens called. He would not lose it. It was best 543 out of 1084. The fourth wall. A pale young woman wearing a floppy hat hummed a Mary Poppins song to herself, and suddenly frowned when she felt a call tugging at her. Crossing her arms, she shook her head. As interesting as it would be, I can't take a vacation, she said as she wandered over and gently laid a hand upon a person in a bed. All throughout the room were people who had gone to sleep and never gotten up. The young woman frowned, hoping her younger brother was okay and that he would get back soon from wherever he was. The fourth wall. A series of regular people sat around a table at a place called Der Waffle House as they were each passed a yellow post-it note. They each frowned when they felt the call. What was that, Rube? A blonde woman named George asked the man handing each of the people at the table a post-it note. None of our business, he said simply. The fourth wall. A skeletal old man calmly sliced at his deep dish pizza. All around him in the pizzeria, dead bodies littered the floor. An immaculate white ring gleamed on one of his fingers as she stuck another bite of pizza into his mouth. He felt a strange call, but even if he was inclined to answer it, as long as that upstart fallen angel had him held in that unseemly spell of his, he could do nothing. The man simply looked out the window at his white Mustang, the weather in Chicago getting worse and worse. If the boy didn't get here soon, there wouldn't be a city left. And that would be a pity, he liked their pizza, after all. The fourth wall. A widely grinning figure bit into an apple as he watched the young man write with unholy fervor into a blank notebook. He had heard a summons tug at his being, but this was much more interesting. The fourth wall. An orange-haired teen swung his sword, and a spiral of red and black shot forth to destroy a masked creature. He suddenly faltered as an odd feeling washed over him, only nearly dodging another masked foe. A short woman with black hair yelled at him. And the orange-haired teen put the incident out of his mind and returned his focus to the battle at hand as the woman froze one of their foes into a pillar of ice. The fourth wall. A cloaked figure grinned down at a man bearing a blessed whip, the bane of his master's existence, as the figure hovered amongst the halls of a castle. He felt a summons, but paid it no heed, as he served only his eternal master. The fourth wall. A blue-haired teen put a handgun to his head and pulled the trigger upon a rooftop. Instead of his own gray matter coming out, a figure with a heart appeared in the air behind the youth, only to suddenly be shred apart from within as a colossus in tattered black robes emerged. A series of chained coffins hovering about it. It heard a summons, but it cared not. It only cared for the masked blob before it, waving its many swords beneath the light of the green full moon. It was one of its missing pieces. Letting out a war, the robed figure charged the shapeless foe, its sword held high. The fourth wall. A red-haired woman suddenly gripped her stomach as a wave of vertigo crashed over her. What was that? She asked weakly, feeling ill. None of our damn business, that's what a voice responded. Who the hell does that shitbag think he is, calling me? Damn it, I am so pissed off right now. Come on, kid, let's go get some hot pods. That should make us feel better. Damn fanfiction writers, thinking they can just put anyone they please in their shitty little stories. They better pay me royalties for this, the voice raged. The young woman had learned long ago to ignore the strange things that the being that she shared her body with said. And instead placed her onyx blade upon her shoulder and went off in search of hot pods, instead. The fourth wall. The third could not understand why he still drew breath. He should have summoned forth the Shinigami and sealed away this abomination. Steeling his resolve, he prepared to unleash his most devastating jutsus upon the blob, when suddenly he noticed something moving amongst the grass. A tiny black shape was now marching towards the blob and then climbing it. All the ninja present stopped and stared, trying to figure out what it was. Is that the god of death? Anko asked, raising an eyebrow at the shape. Mighty Guy squinted at the thing. I think it is a tiny animal wearing a black cloak, he said, unsure. Kakashi lazily lifted his headband and exposed his Sharingan, and both eyes widened. It was indeed an animal, but it wasn't alive. It was a tiny rodent skeleton holding a scythe. Squeak, the figure said and began to swipe at the blob with its scythe. All the ninja present could only stare at the spectacle. That's the thing that defeated the fox, Anko asked, seriously unimpressed with death. Interesting, a voice that caused all the ninjas to stiffen, as it sounded like two slabs of concrete rubbing together. Not a drop of mouse blood or even a fresh egg, the owner of the voice mused. This is most unusual, it observed. As one, the ninja turned and beheld a cloaked skeleton holding a scythe. Good day, to you all, it greeted pleasantly. I don't suppose any of you would happen to be a wizard, would you?